Um, there. Okay. Official good morning to all. Welcome to welcome to Monday. Um, how's the weekend? Anything fun? Good weekend? What'd you do?
Stanley Park.
You went to what? Oh, you
No,
went
no,
to
not
Stanley
Stanley
Park.
Park. Yeah.
Had you been there before?
Nope.
No? Beautiful, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Were there a lot of people out or?
It was alright.
Yeah.
Not too crowded, not too little people as well.
Oh, perfect. Did you walk all the way around?
I cycled around.
Oh, you cycled around.
Yeah.
Did it and it didn't sort of clog up?
No.
Okay.
It was smooth.
I've I think I've cycled around it maybe once or twice, but sometimes there's so many bikes it's not really that fun because you just get
It
stuck.
wasn't that congested on Saturday.
Yeah. Did you go early or?
Pretty late actually.
Okay.
Around 6. Yeah.
Hmm. Nice. Then you get to the sun kind of going,
Yeah.
starting to go down over the. Yeah.
I did watch the sunset.
You did watch it? Yeah. Beautiful, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's Yeah. It's so beautiful over there. Anyone else do anything fun? No? No other fun was had?
The
Okay.
whole weekend.
What's that?
I slept the whole weekend.
You slept the whole weekend?
Yeah.
Well, that's good. You need to recharge, right? What did I do? I don't think I did anything fun this weekend either. My partner and I are moving in a couple days, so it's all like packing and getting organized, and it's, you know,
Yeah, I hate moving.
it's it is the worst, but we're mostly organized, I think. I hope. We'll find out on Wednesday. Anyway, okay, let's say hi to some people here as well. So Sean's here. Good morning, Sean. Basil's here. Good morning, Basil. Hamad is here. Good morning. Simran is here. Good morning, Simran. Basil's here. Good morning to you. Reza's here. Good morning, Reza. Elizabeth is here. Good morning. Awais is here. Good morning, Awais. Mir is here. Good morning, Mir. And Hassan's here. Good morning to you. Okay, so um, anyone remember what we were talking about on Friday? Power and oppression? Yep. Indeed, we were, right? So I think maybe on Thursday we started off talking about stereotypes and prejudice and discrimination, right? And so we talked about stereotypes as things that we think we know about people or groups based on the kind of visual information that we see. We talked about prejudice in terms of the positive or negative feelings we might have towards people or groups because of those things that we know. And then we talked about discrimination, right? Which is the act of, well, not the act of, it's when you act on your prejudicial ideas, right? You either do something or maybe you don't do something, right? You don't invite someone. I made the example of the dog. There's lots of stereotypes out there about dogs. Some are true, some are not. Some are true for some dogs and some not true for other dogs. People have positive or negative prejudices towards dogs. Would you say that people have more negative prejudice toward cats? Would you say there's more like hate for cats out there? No? Yeah, maybe? No, me neither. Me neither. Well, some people like to sort of, talk trash about cats, and I don't know why. But anyway, I made the example of the dog. You could have positive or negative prejudices about dogs, and that could lead you to discriminate, right? Either positively or negatively, right? Yeah, and so I talked very briefly to you about some psychological studies that were conducted to demonstrate prejudice or to identify that it exists. And we just talked about two. There's actually lots of these, and so this is not, this study here is not one of a kind. There's lots of studies that show that humans have prejudice, right? Sometimes even when they aren't aware of it. Good morning, Jesse. And so in this particular one here, they sent out some false resumes. All the resumes were kind of tailored to the job. Some had stereotypically black names, some had stereotypically white names, and lo and behold, the white names got more callbacks, right? More people called them for interviews. And that sort of pattern held even when the resumes with black sounding names had better credentials and better experience, right? And so you can clearly see that discrimination is happening there. But again, it's probably not overt, it's probably subconscious, right? Again, there are some racists out there, there always is, but this is probably a case of people's biases, right? These people's subconscious ideas that get in the way of them seeing these resumes as they should, right? And I suggested that some companies actually go to the step of removing names from resumes so that as a hiring manager or as an HR manager, you can't be, your biases can't interfere because you don't know anything about the person. All you know is their experience and their credentials, and you hire based on that. And the person who shows up in your office is the person who shows up in your office, right? Good morning. So we talked about this one. We also talked about the idea of, good morning, the idea of Obama, right? And so I asked you a somewhat seemingly silly question of whether Obama was black or white, and we had some different kind of answers for that. But what the study here showed, that Eugene Caruso showed, is that depending on people, whether they identified with Obama and his politics or whether they didn't, it influenced how they saw him, right? And so people who were kind of more aligned with him seemed to like him, or seemed that liked him, or their politics were more aligned. They saw him as lighter skinned, right? And people who didn't agree with him saw him as darker, right? Which again is a strange thing, right? That the man is only one color, and yet people perceive him differently depending on whether they feel he's kind of one of them, or if he's, not one of them, if he's on the opposing team, if you will. Which is weird, I think, right? But again, I was trying to sort of drive home the point that the sort of stereotypes that you hold, either the ones that you know about or the ones that are kind of under the surface, they do kind of influence the way that you perceive the world. And this is a perfect example of, literally, it literally changes the way you see things, which, I barely believe it, but it happens, right? What we were talking about, not yesterday, Friday, is this idea of privilege, right? And what privilege was. And if Andre was here, he would tell us the definition he had of privilege, which was pretty darn good, but he's not here. Does anyone remember what he said? When you can do something that other people cannot do, that's what he said, right? Yeah, and that's pretty good, right? That's a pretty simple way of outlining exactly what is, what this thing is about. But from there it gets more complicated, right, in social justice terms, because privilege is sometimes invisible to people, right? Sometimes we don't know when it's working and when it's not, right? So, good morning. Sorry, Daniel, you weren't here when I said, but we've got to make sure we keep our masks on all the time, unless we're eating or drinking. Sorry about that, but that's just the way things are right now until we're all vaccinated. Did anyone have, was anyone able to get vaccination appointments? June 10? Yeah? Okay. Tomorrow? Oh, okay. So you guys are in the process? Yeah, that's good. That's good. I just got my email for my second dose, so hopefully in a couple weeks I'll have number 2, and then I'll be totally immune. No, but I'll be as immune as I'm going to be, so that'll be good. Right, okay, so something you can do that others can't, right? So I asked you to read this article and then answer some questions. Now, can I just give you a few minutes just to look over that article again, because I know it's been a couple days and it's probably not fresh. So can we take just 4 or 5 minutes to just look over that article one more time before we talk about the rest of the questions? Yeah? Okay. Let's do that. Where is it? There it is. Yeah, put some time on the clock here. Okay. So hopefully that's enough time so that we can remember what we talked about. what are some ways in which privilege benefits those people in the dominant group? Give me some examples if you can. How does it? If you want to use me as an example, you're allowed to, because here in Canada, I'm the member of a bunch of dominant groups, right? So if you want to use me as an example, that's fine. But what are some ways in which privilege benefits me? Do you need some more time with the article? Are you confused? Are you asleep? What what's happening here? It's very quiet. What's that? You need a few more minutes? Is that true? Okay. Let's take just a few more minutes and continue, okay? Okay, good people, can we try now? All right. So, ways in which privilege benefits the dominant group. You can steal from Peggy. Malika, give me one, if you can. Yes, how? How does privilege benefit the dominant group?
You can move into somewhere new, like neighbors will be neutral.
Okay, yeah. So if you move into somewhere, a new building, a new place, you can feel comfortable that your neighbors will be nice to you, or at the very least, they will ignore you, right? You don't have to worry that they will dislike you because you are, of a certain race or ethnicity, right? What's another way? If you what? Okay. Oh, mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, so if you want to write a check, does anyone write checks anymore? Does anyone even do that? Does everyone just Interact transfer everything? Or pay by credit card? I don't know. But if you do, yeah, you can do so and know that your race isn't going to count against you, right? People aren't going to say, "Oh, I wonder if this is a good check," just because you belong to a certain group, right? Give me another one.
People will always be kind to you.
Well, it's true. People will may be kind to you, but if they're not, if they're a jerk, then, like, if someone's a jerk to me, I never have to think about the fact, oh, is it because I'm white, right? That's just not something that usually happens, right? I usually just think, oh, they're just a jerk, right? Or maybe I was a jerk and they're being a jerk back to me, right? But I don't have to worry about whether it's because of color of my skin, right? What else?
Could open doors whether you're qualified or not qualified. Open doors for you.
Right. Yeah, I may have a little easier time, finding employment or gaining positions. My qualifications may, people will round them up, right? People will, oh, it's close enough kind of thing. Whereas with people in different social groups, different races, they may get the opposite effect, right? And maybe we can add into that, Nicole, the resume study that we talked about, where my resume will be seen, without any sort of stereotypical filter on it, right? I'll just be seen for my qualifications, right? There will be no other sort of, stereotypical ideas kind of getting in the way of that, right? What else? Maybe just one more. Just give me one more. What's that?
Can I give a reference from TV?
Sure.
So it was about law and everything. So is it true if you're part of the dominant group, the judges and the jury would favor you more?
What do you think? Yeah, what do you think, people? If you're on trial for something, if you're part of the dominant group, do you think the judge or the jury would look more favorably on you?
I don't think they're supposed to, but it does affect them.
Right. Well, they're definitely not supposed to. But Nicole's saying, yeah.
No, I'm agreeing.
You're agreeing with Ben? Yeah, I think you're right. It's true, right? You're supposed to be impartial, right? Justice is blind, right? And justice might be blind, but people certainly aren't, right? And yeah, so I think you're correct in saying that it would influence them. And in fact, this may shock you, but in a study that they did, and I don't know if this study has been replicated. But how did it go? Right, they looked at judges in the courts, and they looked at how kind of their sentences, right, the punishments they gave out, and how harsh were they. And interestingly, judges give out more harsh sentences before lunch than after lunch. Why do you think that is? They're probably yeah they're hungry, right? Yeah, right around 11:30 they're getting a little hangry, right? And so they're like, "No, you're going to jail forever," right? And then after they have their sandwich and their dessert, they're like, "Ah, you're okay," right? So, yeah, again, judges aren't they're supposed to be objective, but humans are not objective, right? We're not robots, we're not machines. And so, yeah, sometimes you can see that pattern showing up. So I think you would definitely see a difference in terms of the social groups that someone belongs to. Again, it shouldn't be that way. It's not supposed to be that way, but I think you would probably see that it is. Do people who have privilege, are they doing something wrong?
No.
No? Why not?
Most people that have privilege don't even realize they have privilege.
Okay.
It's just something that they've been like taught since they were young. Like because they never experienced the other, they don't know anything else.
Sure, right? So I am not a woman, right? And so in a first-hand kind of way, I don't know what that's like, right? I don't know what that experience is to be a woman, right? And women are a minoritized group here in North America and in other places in the world too. I don't know what that's like, right? Rafay, what do you think? Are people with privilege doing something wrong?
It depends. People who are aware of it, they're using it. Like they're aware of it, but they're using it negatively.
They're aware of it and they're using it negatively?
Yeah.
Okay. How do you mean that? How could it be used negatively? How could I use my privilege negatively? No.
How about like you go to the cop, you go to the cop and you complain about someone like you and just someone else from the minority register and you tell them.
Oh.
And they both talk to the cop saying something happened. Like each of them has a different story. Who is the cop more likely to do?
Right. So I could, I guess so, right? As I could sort of use my institutional power, if you will, to talk to the cops, and that's exactly what. Do you remember that? You may not have heard about this, but there was a news story about a woman in, I think, a park in New York, and she was walking her dog, and she was a white woman, and a black man had approached her and said, "Hey, look, can you put your dog on the leash, please? Because you're supposed to, it's an on-leash area. You're not supposed to take the dog off the leash." I think he was out looking at birds, maybe. He was a bird watcher, and the dog was scaring away the birds, and so he said, "Excuse me, miss, can you please put your dog on the leash?" And this woman kind of had a bit of a freak out, and she called 911, and she was afraid of this guy who was approaching her, and this guy was filming her the whole time, and he wasn't harassing her. He was like, "Look, miss, I'm not trying to, I'm not threatening you. I'm just, can you just please put your dog on the leash?" And yeah, so there was a whole thing, and so she, I guess you could say she kind of used her privilege to, I guess, react to this guy's request, right? Yeah, I guess that's true. What are other thoughts? Are people with privilege doing something wrong, or are they bad?
The example you gave just made me think of the one that was quite a while back. It was in Central Park, I think,
Yeah.
The one where the 5 black teenagers were arrested for rape, but they were only accused.
Right. I don't know if that's necessarily.
It's more discrimination, right?
What's that?
It's more of discrimination, right?
That's definitely discrimination based on
My see the privilege as in like the rapist was eventually like identified as a white person, I think, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah.
And like it was immediately dismissed as as a suspect because there were the black kids in the park at the time. Would that be a form of privilege?
Say that last part again?
The white guy was dismissed as a suspect immediately
Oh.
because of the black kids.
Yeah, could be. Could be. Yeah, there's definitely some pretty strong racial discrimination there.
He's
Um,
protected by his privilege, in
and,
other words.
and say again?
He was protected by his privilege, so he wasn't a private person, so he was protected by his privilege.
Yeah, I guess if Peggy McIntosh was writing it, she would say, you know, I can commit a crime and not be automatically accused of it, right? Somebody else may be accused first, right? Which was exactly the case, right? In a similar thing, we could say that, you know, if you are, and this has come up recently in the United States, if you are involved in any incident with the police, so if you come into contact with the police, you can feel comfortable that the police are going to be on your side, right? Or at least not use excessive violence, right? If I get pulled over, if I'm driving and I get pulled over, I don't have to worry about the fact that it's because of the color of my skin, and I don't worry that I'm going to get shot, right? And again, it's not quite the same situation here in Canada as it is in the U.S. It's a different dynamic. Doesn't mean that there's no anti-black racism in Canada. Things are a little bit different. But still, I've been pulled over by the police, not that many times, but I never feared for my life. It was more like, oh crap, now I'm getting a speeding ticket, and I've got to pay it, right? But did I fear for my life? No. Did I put my hands up? No. Was I worried about reaching for my insurance for the car? Definitely not, right? But there are lots of people, particularly in the United States, who fear all of those things, right? Because if they get pulled over by a police officer, I think we've seen in the news that sometimes things get very out of control very quickly, right? And so that's an element of privilege, right? I don't have to worry about that kind of stuff, but there are people that do, and they shouldn't have to. They do. This is connected to number 3, but can privilege be a good thing or not?
To the privilege, it's a good thing.
Okay, how so? To the privilege, it's a good thing.
Let's say your person, family-wise, your father is like owning some institution that says school. If your father is owning that school and you go to the school, I'm pretty sure that the way you're gonna be treated at the school is different from the way other students are gonna be treated. It might be slightly different, but still different.
Sure.
Experience might be different.
Yeah, that might benefit me for sure, right? If I was, that would be great. That would be great for me, right? What else? How else might privilege be a good thing?
Jobs.
Right? Like it might be easier for people in the dominant group to find work. Absolutely, absolutely. How else? Let me say this. So I asked you a minute ago, I said, you know, are people with privilege doing something wrong, right? And I admitted that I have, in this country anyway, I have a lot of privilege, right? I'm a man, I'm white, I'm a roughly middle-aged person. You know, I have a Christian background, although I'm not really religious. I'm an English speaker, I'm a citizen. So I'm a member of a lot of dominant groups, right? In fact, the only group that I'm not a dominant member of a dominant group is kind of in terms of economic or social class, right? I'm not, as you might have imagined, I'm not wildly wealthy, right? And so I'm a member of a lot of groups, and so, you know, I get a lot of advantages, and some of those advantages are unearned, right? And so can it be a good thing? Well, it can be a good thing if I actually use it, right? Because I can talk about this stuff and I can say that yes, you know, we have social inequality in Canada that needs to be rectified. Yes, racism exists, right? Yes, privilege is a real thing. Yes, I have advantages that maybe that needs to be extended to everyone, right? And so I can talk about that stuff and people will listen to me, right? Because when minoritized groups talk about these things, sometimes it can come off as self-serving, right? As if they just want special rights, right? Or, oh, they're just whining about this. Or, oh, this really isn't a problem, just get over it, right? That can be the response to minoritized groups bringing up issues of social inequality and social justice, right? But if I do it, I can't be accused of that same motivation, right? So I can actually speak about these things. I can, help get the word out, right? When people, when Indigenous people in Canada say that yes, racism against Indigenous people is a huge problem, I can stand up and say, yeah, it totally is, right? I can support that, right? So I can use my privilege to help us get closer to a more equitable society, right? So I can use that. There is good things to it, right? And if you look at that list, how many did Peggy have there? She had like 600 or so, didn't she? 50. She had 50. If you look at those, are those all bad? Are those all bad things? I think for the most part they're good things, aren't they? Yeah, like when you move into a neighborhood, you can be confident that your neighbors will probably be nice to you. That's something that should exist for everyone, right? Yeah, if you go into a store, people should be nice to you, shouldn't they? Yeah. When you get pulled over by a police officer, you should feel comfortable that they're not going to shoot you as long as you don't try to shoot them, right? Everybody should have these kind of rights, right? And so some of them are not bad, they just need to be extended to everyone, right? And so again, we want to get rid of privileges that give some people access to something and not everyone else, right? But again, a lot of things need to just be extended to everyone. Now, one of the last question I had for you here that I was kind of curious about is, can you think about a way in which you have privilege, either here or in your home country? Or maybe a way in which you had privilege before but now you don't, or that you didn't have privileges that you now have. Let me give you an example, and then you can tell me. I remember when I was, how old was I? 13 or 14. I went to a junior high school in Edmonton, Alberta, and across the street from the high school was a 7-Eleven, okay, like a convenience store. There wasn't really much else in the area of the school, so like everybody went over to the convenience store at lunch because there was really nothing else to do, and you're 13, right? So I would go in there and I would feel the cashier, the person who worked there, staring at me the whole time, right? Watching me as I went up the aisles looking for my snacks. Why do you think he was staring at me so intently? Because I'm so good looking, right? What?
You were young.
I was young and
Maybe she thought you're not gonna pay for it, I don't know.
yeah, he probably thinks I'm going to steal something, right? I'm going to put something in my pocket and not pay for it, right? Which young people sometimes do, all right? And so, yeah, he stared at me the whole time, and I could feel it, right? I could feel him watching me, because you can feel when somebody's watching you, right? So I could feel it, and it was really uncomfortable, and I hated it. But now, of course, if I go into a convenience store, do you think anyone stares at me? No. Right? Nobody, I could set myself on fire in the aisle and nobody would notice, right? So I kind of have privilege now that I'm older, right? People don't expect me to steal from a convenience store. But as a 13-year-old, they expected I would, right? That's the stereotype. There's some truth to that stereotype because some kids, you know, steal when they're younger, right? So, yeah, that's kind of a privilege I have now that at the time I didn't have, right? People saw me as a young kid, a young teenager. Young teenagers like to steal, therefore, this kid's gonna steal, I better watch him. Right? And I did steal a few times. No, I didn't. No, I didn't. I did not. But that was the difference, right? So, can you think of some ways in which you either were privileged or are privileged?
I don't know if it's because I'm hearing or not, but because of my family, I had this privilege to come here
Yeah.
and stay together than my friends in my country.
Yeah, so a certain amount of money gives privilege, right? You're able to do things that not everyone is able to do, right? And so, yeah, it's true, right? You've been able to come here, maybe some of your friends weren't able to, right? And so, yeah, that's one way, right? And again, it's not a bad thing, right? We're glad you're here. Reza here says, so when boys study in my country, they do not have to join the military for 2 years. So, yeah, if you have the ability to attend school, whether that's the kind of intellectual ability or the sort of financial ability, yeah, you can avoid military service if that's something you would like to do, which if I was in Iran, I would want to avoid military service as well, but that's just me. So yeah, that's a privilege, right? I assume, I don't know, I assume not everyone is able to do that. But some people can. What else? Other ways?
When I was underage back in Kuwait,
Uh-huh.
the public transportation was free.
The public transportation was free
Yeah.
in Kuwait
Yeah, for those who are underage and those who are students.
for those who are students?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so yeah, as a student you have a little privilege there, right? Probably not a huge concern for social equality, but yeah, it's something you get to do that others don't, right? What else?
Like when elementary school student or junior high school student,
Uh-huh.
I don't need to pay when I go to the clinic or hospital.
Okay. Okay. So it was sorry, say that so when you're a junior high student you
Or elementary school student, I don't need to pay when I go to the clinic or
okay.
hospital.
Okay. And why don't you have to?
I think because of the tax.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, we could kind of extend that a little bit outside of a single society, right? So here in Canada and sounds like in Japan, right? Other countries too. Yeah, if you're sick, you just go to the hospital and they will treat you, right? And the hospital system is funded by taxes and you don't have to pay for your own medical treatment. But that's not the case in all countries, right? And in a country that doesn't have a healthcare system like Japan or Canada, yeah, like if you're poor, if you don't have a lot of money and you get sick, you're in big trouble, right? You may die, right? And so yeah, there's an economic privilege there as well. If you have money, you can stay healthy. If you don't have money, you better keep your fingers crossed and, cook all your food thoroughly, right? Because you cannot afford to get sick, right? Yeah, that's a good one. My partner and I, who is a woman, my partner, she and I can walk down the street in probably most countries of the world and hold hands with each other and nobody will think anything, right? Oh, isn't that cute, right? But if she was a man, if I was a gay man, could I do that? Could I walk down the street in pretty much any country in the world holding my boyfriend's hand? No, right? Not in every country. In some countries I could, but not everyone, right? And in some countries it would be dangerous, very dangerous to do so, right? So again, that's a heterosexual privilege, right? I can show my affection for my partner in public within socially acceptable limits. I can show affection for them and nobody thinks anything of it, right? If I had a same-sex partner, that might be different, right? I might have to pretend that, he's just my buddy kind of thing. Right? Anything else you can think of? Ways in which you're privileged?
It's not with me.
Okay.
People use people with guys.
Okay.
I mean, there's a certain the specific time, like in the evening, I know, I'm very sure I will actually get the train or the bus. I have to get an Uber or get like something.
Oh.
Because I'm a little bit,
Yeah.
no, not necessarily that something has happened to me, but because those instincts are already there.
Yeah. Right.
That's
So,
interesting.
yeah, so for women, women are often very conscious about where they can go and when they can go there and with whom, right? And so for women, the world is a more dangerous place, right? And so, Nicole, you're very conscious about where you are and your surroundings and when it's too late and you don't want to take the train after a certain time, you want to take an Uber. Yeah. Guys, do you ever think about that kind of thing? Probably not, right? Unless you were in like the worst part of town, where like people are getting murdered, like then you're appropriately afraid. But
Other than that,
yeah, exactly. Yeah, I've taken late buses and late trains all the time, and I've never been worried, right? But for women, it's kind of a different story, right? Shouldn't be that way, right? It would, it should not. Women should be safe at any time of the day or night in any situation, but it's not the way things are, right? So yeah, men have the privilege of being able to sort of go wherever they want, whenever they want, and women make these extra considerations, right? And I think it would probably surprise most of us guys the degree to which women are aware of that all the time. Yeah. But that's a good one. That's a good one. Any others? Yeah?
Still part of women.
Okay.
Let's say there are two cases, like a man being raped and a woman being raped. In most cases, with the story of a woman, they're gonna be like, what was she wearing? Like, why are you asking what she's wearing instead of what happened?
Yeah.
So in most cases tend to ask what was she wearing, she probably didn't or something like that.
Yeah, there's a lot of cases that have to do with sometimes with rape, with sexual assault, even with dress codes in schools. You'll see occasional stories about, and yeah, the stories about how women dress, right? And women cannot dress in certain ways, and if they do, they are almost inviting men to behave a certain way, right? And if men do behave that way, somehow it is the woman's fault, right? For dressing a certain way or presenting themselves a certain way, right? And it's somehow not men's fault, right? So, and yeah, there's a lot of language around that, the way we think about things, the way we talk about things, what kind of questions get asked when an incident occurs, right? When someone is raped. Yeah, there's a lot of that stuff, right? What was I gonna say? Yeah, like a lot of the statistics around rape say that, last year, 1,000 women were raped, but they don't actually say who did it, right? So we talk about who the victim is, but, who is the perpetrator, right? It's overwhelmingly, like I'm sure it's nearly 100% men. And so why is this statistic not, last year, men raped 1,000 women? Right? Why do we say it one way and not the other way? Right? And that goes back to that theory of knowledge, right? The way that we know things and the things that we know are tied to power structures in society. Why does society say that a certain number of women were raped and not that men raped a certain number of women? Right? Same statistic, but the way that they're presented can tell you something about who has power in society. It's a really good one. Actually, it was horrible, but it's a good example. It's a good example. Anything else you can think of? It's pretty good. Okay, let's take a little break. When we come back, I have kind of a very short fictional story for you to read that will sort of help us distinguish between some other types of privilege, and then we'll be able to move on to ableism. But just a short story when we get back, okay? So take a break, and I'll see you in 10. Okay, and we are back. So, I think we're doing well with this privilege thing. I think we're understanding that yes, indeed, it is things that you can do that others can't, and it's based on who has power in society. It's based on stereotypes. It's based on prejudicial ideas, right? It's based on how government institutions work and how social institutions work. A lot of privileges aren't necessarily a bad thing, but again, the problem is they're not extended to everyone. And so if we read the list in the article, a lot of those are not bad, provided that everyone has, relatively equal access to them, right? And so, but if you have privilege, and most of us have some kind of privilege of some sort, you're able to use it for good, right? You are able to speak about things even though, you're not disadvantaged, right? And that helps move things toward a more equitable state if you can help validate it and support it and talk about it, right? Now, here's what I want to talk to you about here. Privilege has some external and some structural elements to it, and then it has some internal or attitudinal elements to it, okay? And so I'll point out a few of these as we go forward, but I want to tell you what they are, and then I want you to read this short story that will help us to understand what these things mean, okay? So, privilege has the following external and structural elements. So, integration of dominant group norms into the structures of society, okay? So what that means is that society is basically built for the dominant group. It's designed in a way that benefits the dominant group and disadvantages minoritized groups, okay? Can I give you an example of that? Because it probably sounds weird, doesn't it? Does that sound weird? Okay, so you all came to school this morning, or if you're online, I'll just pretend that you did. You all came to school this morning, right? And you probably left your house or apartment or basement suite or wherever you're staying, and you headed outside, you walked, you hopped on a bus, you hopped on a SkyTrain, maybe you rode a bike, right? You did all these things and you got here really probably without thinking about it, right? You were probably on your phone, maybe you had your headphones in listening to music. Hey, Ellie. You just kind of got here the same way that you got here every other day. But that's because most of you are able-bodied, right? You can see, you can hear, you can walk on your feet, you can go up and down stairs. Your hands can be used to open doors and things like that. And so if you were a person with a physical disability, if you used a wheelchair, or if you were blind, or if you were deaf, you would have a bunch of barriers and obstacles in your way, right? So just think about maybe using a wheelchair and sort of having to sort of go down the street in a wheelchair and worry about, getting on and off curbs or getting on and off the bus, or worrying whether the elevator at the SkyTrain station is working, right? Coming here to Columbia College and realizing that, of course, we're just using the stairs right now, so you'd have to use the elevator, right? Where is a bathroom that you can use, right? There's all these kind of obstacles, but you did not experience any of those, and you didn't even think about it. You just came to school the way you come to school every day, right? So your privilege was kind of invisible to you, right? And so again, but the privilege here is structural, right? So we've created a society that privileges people like us who can walk around and see and hear and use our hands, but it disadvantages people who may not be able to see or hear or use a wheelchair or a walker, right? Imagine if people in wheelchairs, imagine if they were the majority and they were the dominant group. I wonder what this world would look like, right? It'd be a very different world, right? We would build the world differently if everybody used a wheelchair. But again, society is not specifically designed for those people. It's designed for people like us. And then we make accommodations, right? Ramps and things like that. Here's the construction of what's normal and not normal by the dominant group, right? Can you think of an example of this where the dominant group gets to establish what's normal and not normal? Has anyone been grocery shopping here? Superstore, maybe? Yeah, Superstore is pretty good. Where's the white person's food aisle? It's all white people food, right? Except there's a couple of aisles for like ethnic food, right? Have you seen that? And it's got like, it's got products from China and from India and from places like that. So we have an aisle for ethnic food, quote unquote. The rest of it is just food, right? So the rest of that stuff in the store is normal, right? That's normal food. And then there's those two aisles that are kind of different, right? They're ethnic foods. They're kind of different foods, right? So again, the dominant group gets to say what the normal thing is and what's not, okay? There's more to come on that, but we'll talk about it later. And then, of course, we've talked about this too, the invisibility of privilege for the dominant group. Again, you all came here this morning. There were many obstacles in your way, particularly for people with physical disabilities, but you didn't notice any of it, right? You just came here easily, right? Once you got out of bed. Getting out of bed's the hardest part. But once you're out of bed, the rest is easy, right? There's some internal and attitudinal aspects of privilege as well, right? Sometimes privilege has to do with the belief that your group has the right to its position, okay? So men are often in charge, right? They're often in charge of the country, of businesses, of families, right? Why is that? Why should men be in charge and women not, right? Now, nowadays we might not say anything at all. We might say, well, no, women can be in charge too. But in the past, or maybe in other places, they might say, well, no, of course, right? Because the man is the authority, right? Men are the ones who are tough and logical and can make hard decisions, and they have authority, and so they should be in charge, right? And so, yeah, men would believe that, yeah, it was kind of their right to be in charge of things, to boss other people around, right? Internalizing messages of your group's superiority, right? Lots of men think that they are better than women, right? And for those very reasons, right? Because they're tough and logical and, authoritative. There's sometimes a lack of humility that results from not knowing anything about minoritized groups, right? So, do I have a good example for this? Do you have a good example for this one? Maybe it'll come to me later. And again, invisibility of privilege, right? That's also present. So, here's a little story. Here's the little story for you, okay? Obviously, I didn't hand it out. I put it into Microsoft Teams. And if you go to Microsoft Teams, you'll see that it's called this. It's called Internal and Attitudinal Dimensions of Privilege. And so what I'd like you to do is read the story. Again, it's very short and very easy to read. Pay attention to the external elements of privilege and the internal ones, okay? So the ways in which society is constructed and the way in which the dominant group defines what's normal, okay? And then pay attention to how the characters interact with each other and how some characters demonstrate their superiority over other characters, okay? Again, it's a very simple story, very short. I'll give you some time to read it and then we'll talk, okay? Okay, good people. I see, actually time's gotten away from me here. We've only got about 5 minutes, but let's see what we can do here. So, obviously this is a bizarre fictional story, right? But it does illustrate the way that privilege can operate in society, right? So, we have a dominant group and a minoritized group. Who's in the dominant group here? Three-eyed people, right? And who is in the minoritized? Yeah, us poor two-eyed people, right? Awful. Can you imagine? Can you imagine only having two eyes? So what are some of the external or structural elements of privilege that we see here? How is the world kind of designed for three-eyed people? Right. Our character, I think our character is a she, isn't it? Yeah. So this character, she's at the theater, and she's going to look at the program where it talks about, you know, the actors and where they're from and everything. But it's written in such a way that the person in front of them can read it with their eye on the back of their head at the same time, right? And so our two-eyed person here is trying to figure out, okay, how does this thing work, right? And so yeah, the programs are made for people with three eyes. What else? Yeah, so the sunglasses, I would imagine, have a lens on the back as well as on the front, right? So, and there are glasses for two-eyed people, but what are they like? Yeah, they're kind of ugly, right? The cool ones, the fashionable ones, are the ones with three lenses, right? The two-eyed ones are kind of, you know, like your grandmother might wear. Nobody wants those. What else? Other structural things. What? Yeah. Other ways in which, how do we get a sense of what's normal and what's not normal? Clearly, having two eyes is not normal. How is that communicated in the story? Yeah, so there's almost two reactions, right? There's kind of a negative reaction where people are, you know, this little kid is crying and people are like looking at you like, oh my gosh, right? But then there's this other reaction where people are like, what's the word I'm looking for? Kind, but like, but too much, right? Like, what's that? Yeah, they're empathy, but well, I guess there's some empathy there, right? But mixed in with that empathy is the idea that, you know, this character is somehow less, right? She's not as good or something like. So it's almost like pity, right? Or maybe even maybe it's like patronizing, right? Do you know what patronizing means? Have you heard that word before? If you're being patronizing, you're kind of acting like the other person is like not very smart, right? So in the way like you would treat a child, right? You would say, "Oh, you silly child," right? But you're treating like almost an adult this way. You're like, "Oh, Malika, you don't know anything, but trust me." Right? That's kind of patronizing. Okay. So yeah, there's some pity here. There's some patronizing treatment, right? What else? Other external. The menu board at the cafe, right? The menu is, yeah, it's behind her, right? So people with three eyes can just look at it, but she's gotta turn around and look at it, right? What else? What about the doctor? What's the doctor offering? Surgery, right? So to fix her, right? Because she doesn't have this third eye. He has this dangerous experimental surgery, but yeah, don't you want to be normal? Right? So again, there's this idea of, you know, three eyes being normal, and he has the technology to make her normal, maybe. What else? When she goes, this is the last thing we'll say. What about when she goes to the theater? What is she given? Yeah, a white cane, right? Does she need a cane? No. Does any of us need a cane? No. What's that?
Like the CIT that seems like she is handicapped student,
Yeah, and they kind of make her take it, right? And so it doesn't help her, just like it, it's useless to all of us with two eyes. But what does it do? It what? Yeah, it identifies her, right? It's like, oh, there's a two-eyed person finding her way to her seat. Of course, she doesn't need it, but yeah, it identifies her as someone different to the group, right? Okay, so we don't have any more time here. I apologize. We'll pick this up tomorrow, and then we'll tie up this privilege thing and move on to ableism, okay? So thank you all for being here. I hope you have a nice afternoon, and we'll see you, well, in 20 minutes or tomorrow. Okay, bye.